You might recognize developer Ember Lab's previous work, but not for their games, rather for their animation. They weren't into video games, they were primarily an animation studio that worked on adverts and short films like this fan-made animation of Majora's Mask. It's with that said that their new game, Kenna Bridge of Spirits, marks a pivotal moment for the company as their introduction into a new art medium that definitely showcases their animation prowess. Kenna Bridge of Spirits is the latest PlayStation exclusive to come to PS4, PS5 and PC, with many anticipating it as the next must-have PS5 title. Let's see how well that turned out. Kenna Bridge of Spirits has you step into the role of Kenna, who, as the title suggests, acts as the bridge for lost spirits trying to move on to the next life. Our story has us exploring a wide and beautiful linear world that's slowly decaying. Now it's up to Kenna to find the sacred mountain shrine in order to restore things back to normal, all while helping to guide the lost spirits she finds along the way. Kenna is a free-spirited girl who is only looking to help those in need. She's an incredibly endearing character that is only made more likable by the amazing presentation efforts by Ember Lab. The attention to detail in each character's design, down to the facial expressions in the more pivotal scenes, left a lasting impression for the about 9 hours this campaign lasted. It's with that said that I wish there was more exposition with the character, because for as much as this game is still titled Kenna and she's who we're playing as, I feel like we barely got to know her. In the moments where Kenna's personality would peek out, like in a cutscene or in her facial expressions when she'd meditate, I'd get excited to finally get to know her a bit more, only for it to get quickly cut. Instead, as I made my way into each new village, I found myself learning more about the people in those villages as opposed to myself. And while yes, technically we do finally get a glimpse of the exposition by the end of the adventure, by then it didn't feel all that satisfactory. Going into Kenna, I didn't really know what to expect out of the gameplay. I personally avoided seeing much of the gameplay of it leading up to its launch. I was pleasantly surprised to see it feel so much like a traditional 3D Legend of Zelda pre-Breath of the Wild era game. You explore a wide open sandbox world that's slowly uncovered in a linear fashion. You go from village to village, coming across a new issue that the town needs help with, and now it's up to you to figure it out. Sometimes it'll mean solving an environmental puzzle, taking on a boss fight, or some smaller foes as you slowly clean up the corrupted mess destroying the forest. Very similar to how in the indie game Gris, you'd restore the color to the monochrome world, in Kenna the healthy pieces of environment are filled with life, saturated colors in what looks like a DreamWorks film come to life. It's only when Kenna destroys the corrupted pieces that the color and life come back to the otherwise wonderland forest. After defeating bosses, Kenna will earn some sort of upgrade that will then open up more of the world for her to explore. It's a simple gameplay loop that I think would feel more repetitive and trivial if it wasn't so much for the game's presentation and charm. However, I can't say that keeps the combat from feeling a bit shallow. It's incredibly simple and easy. Early on, Kenna is equipped with a spear that she can use in between a light and heavy attack to take on any foe. As for her defense, she's able to use her spiritual powers to create a shield for parrying, and also dodge out of the way of oncoming attacks. Outside of a very small set of unlockable combos that you can unlock through the skill tree, and the occasional new ability like an early earned bow, combat felt unevolved. The moves I was using at the start of the game could easily be used for endgame bosses and foes. Luckily, there is a variety of enemies that get introduced, spacing out different approaches to fighting, but not enough to really feel like it left an impact. Alongside Kenna are the Rot, these tiny little chibi creatures that you can collect. They're reminiscent of the Kodama from Princess Mononoke, and they act as your allies in cleaning out the corruption in the forest and stunning foes during combat. Now, I previously mentioned environmental puzzles, and there are quite a few of them here, but they're very simple. Shooting targets with arrows, activating switches, and moving blocks as climbable platforms with the help of your Rot are the vast majority of puzzles you'll come across. They do luckily evolve later on once a specific ability is unlocked, but a large majority of them did come across as shallow as the game went on. All in all, Kenna's gameplay felt adequate. It didn't really show any moments where things would break or things felt unfair. Rather, it was the bare minimum alright. Perhaps Ember Lab truly invested their efforts in making this a stunning presentation and played it safe when it came to gameplay, because what's here is good, but it lacks any creative risk. While its gameplay could use some work, where Kenna doesn't slack off is in its visuals. Immediately I was stunned by the light work Ember Lab has done with Kenna. The way God rays peek their way into the forest, or how full of life each character feels because of their intricate details in their facial expressions. It's no surprise this team has established a background as an animation studio, because all the skill sets they have are displayed at the forefront. Even the environment has a beautiful look to it. It's such a bright and saturated world that, juxtaposed with the corrupted pieces in the environment, really stick out. Cutscenes and the cinematography in them feel like they were ripped out of a film. The meditation scenes, for example, always look fantastic alongside the animation work and the story transitional scenes. There is a bit of a weird choice with those scenes though. The animated cutscenes were rendered in 24 frames per second, which with more cinematic live action scenes, work great in film, but not so much in animation. Especially if you're playing in a high frame rate mode, the juxtaposition can feel awkward. Speaking of which, let's talk about performance. Kena is available on PS4, PS5, and PC. On PS4 you can expect a 900p 30 frames per second performance that's upgraded to a dynamic 1440p 30 on PS4 Pro. While the frame rate performance is mostly fine on PS4, the issue I came across is streaming in assets on its older hard drive speeds. This means that on occasion you'll get some major pop-in, including elements needed to continue on with the game. Some better optimization is needed on PS4 in that regard. On PS5, performance gets a major upgrade with two specific modes. The high fidelity mode sees a native 4K picture but locked at a 30 frames per second mode. The performance mode on the other hand is a checkerboard 4K picture running at 60 frames per second. That target occasionally dips into the mid 50s but not enough to truly feel terrible in practice. While the higher resolution is nice in 30 FPS, the trade-off doesn't seem worth it, and I prefer the 60 FPS target for a faster and smoother gameplay experience. Finally, there's the PC version, which I didn't get a lot of time to test, but I was able to hit an average of about 50 frames per second on an RTX 3060 rig running at 1440p Ultra preset. If you brought down some of the presets, you could get some higher mileage out of the frame rate and the resolution. Ultimately, I would recommend getting this on a PS5 or PC if you can, with the PS4 being a last resort because of its loading issues. Kena's soundtrack is filled with chimes, bells, and drums that really evoke this feeling of a long-lost fantasy world. There's the atmosphere that's reminiscent of Princess Mononoke, and I absolutely love that sense of adventure that comes alongside it. Easily the best use of music was introducing oncoming bosses that only felt grander alongside those tracks. In regards to the voice performances, I thought the various actors did a great job at conveying what felt like established history and lore in this world. Perhaps it's partially in thanks to the facial work and the animation, but man, the performance genuinely felt authentic, enough that it made me wish I had more time to learn about Kena herself.
Abandon my people.
Kena Bridge of Spirits is a beautiful, magical, and simply marvelous, adequate game. Yeah, I had you going for a second there, huh? I mean, the game is beautiful, its animation work feels like it raises the bar for a lot of new studios, but its gameplay leaves a lot of room for improvement, riskier ideas, and generally just way more development. If you took away its presentation, I think this game would be mediocre at best. However, you can tell the team put a lot of effort, just didn't really balance it out among the various aspects of what makes this video game a video game. As a debut title, I think it's good, but I'd love to see what else the studio can do, and I hope we all get the chance to see that through.